welcome back to the channel and welcome back to this PMP playlist. In this video, we'll be covering the business domain questions. These are 10 questions, 31 to 40. This will include environmental based questions and governance based questions. Let's get started. So the first question is, the project deliverables have been formally accepted. The sponsor wants to close the project immediately. However, the business case assumes benefits will be realized 6 months after implementation. What should the project manager do? A. Close the project now, but ensure a benefits realization plan is handed over to operations. B. Keep the project open for 6 months until all benefits are realized. C. Refuse to close the project until the financial benefits are proven. D. Transfer the budget to operations and resign as project manager. Your time starts now. Okay, so let me reread the question here. The project deliverables have been formally accepted. When we say these have been formally accepted, this means it's about project closure. The sponsor wants to close the project immediately. However, business case assumes benefits will be realized 6 months after the implementation. Here, basically, we are being tested on understanding the relationship between project closure and benefits realization. This part and benefits realization this part. So what are the options here? Close the project down, but ensure a benefits realization plan is handed over to operations. So projects are typically closed after deliverables are accepted. Long-term benefits are usually tracked by operations or a benefits owner, not by the project manager. So this looks pretty correct that you are saying that we'll be handing over the project or the benefits realization plan to operations team. And project manager should ensure a benefits realization plan and ensure this is properly handled. So this looks correct to me so far. Let's go through the next options that we have, which is B, C, and D. B says, keep the project open for 6 months until all benefits are realized. Keeping the project formally open for 6 months is often inefficient and not typical, so this is wrong. Next is refuse to close a project until the financial benefits are proven. The project manager is not responsible, I just mentioned. The project manager is not responsible for any personal guaranteeing benefits. He is only responsible for delivering the outputs. So this is also wrong. The last option is transfer the budget to operations and resign as a project manager. This is extreme. So this should be ticked wrong without even thinking about anything, because this is unrelated. This is extreme. You're talking about resigning, which is nowhere related to this question. Hence, the correct answer is A. Close the project now, but ensure a benefits realization plan is handed over to operations. Let's go to the next question. Your project introduces a new process that will change daily work for several departments. Resistance is high and some managers are actively discouraging their staff from adopting the new process. What should you do? A. Ask the sponsor to order everyone to comply without discussion. B. Ignore resistance and focus only on technical implementation. C. Work with change management specialists to develop a structured organizational change management plan. D. Delay the project until resistance disappears. The time starts now. So the question is, your project introduces a new process that will change daily work for several departments. So you're introducing a new process and that's going to change the daily work process for several departments. Hence, the resistance is high and some managers are actively discouraging their staff from adopting to the new process. So there is a resistance. What should you do? Let's see the options. Option A is ask the sponsor to order everyone to comply without discussion. This is obviously wrong because you always have to discuss, have a committee set to understand what is beneficial and why you are resisting. This is basically like forcing compliance without involvement, which tends to increase resistance. Hence, this is wrong. Let's see what is option B here. Option B is ignore resistance and focus only on technical implementation. This is also wrong because you cannot ignore the resistance. Because if you're ignoring resistance, it leads to poor adoption and benefits loss. What's option C? Work with change management specialist to develop a structured organizational change management plan. So as I said in the beginning, this is basically about organizational change impact. So in this question, we are talking about the integration of organizational change management with project management. This option says work with change management specialist. This is basically telling us that projects change processes, roles, and behaviors. So structure change management It includes communication, training, stakeholder engagement, and reinforcement. This looks somewhat correct. Let's park it. Let's see what D says. Delay the project until resistance disappears. Resistance rarely disappears on its own, hence we have to close this out. Hence option is C, which is the correct answer. Let's go to the next one. The sponsor suggests releasing a product without completing all mandatory regulatory tests to meet a trade show deadline, promising that we will fix compliance gaps later with a patch. What should the project manager do? Refuse to violate regulatory requirements and explain legal and reputational risk. Agree because the sponsor is accountable for business outcomes. Release the product quietly and update the documentation later. Ask the team to sign a waiver accepting responsibility. The time starts now. So this question is the sponsor suggests releasing a product, okay, without completing all the mandatory regulatory tests, which are required just to meet a trade show deadline. So here the sponsor is requesting or suggesting to release the product without doing the mandatory regulatory tests, promising that we will fix the patch gaps later with we'll fix compliance gaps later with a patch. What should the project manager do? This is basically regulatory compliance versus sponsor request type of question. This question is testing us on ethical behavior in the context of regulatory compliance. Let's start from the option D. Ask the team to sign a waiver accepting responsibility. A waiver does not remove organizational responsibility, and this is unethical, hence this is wrong. C is release the product quietly and update the documentation later. This is a violation, even if documentation is updated late. B, agree because the sponsor is accountable for business outcomes. Sponsor authority does not override legal or ethical obligations. Hence, this is also wrong. A, refuse to violate regulatory requirements and explain legal and reputational risk. Obviously, this is the last option left, and this is correct because regulatory requirements are constraints that must be respected. Releasing a non-compliant product may be illegal and dangerous. The project manager must not facilitate such a violation. So this is the right answer. Let's go to the next one. During execution, a strategic review shows that project's expected benefits are now significantly lower because of market changes. The portfolio board is questioning the project's continued justification. What is the best action for the project manager? A, insist on completing the project because a lot of effort has already been invested. B, provide updated information on cost, progress, and risk to support a decision to continue, change, or terminate. C, ignore the portfolio board and continue execution as planned. D, immediately terminate the project without further discussion. Your time starts now. From this, you definitely understand that this question is about portfolio alignment. It says that during execution, a strategic review shows that the project's expected benefits are now significantly lower because of market changes. The portfolio board is questioning the project's continued justification. Hence, this is a portfolio alignment question. Now, what is the best action the project manager should take? Let's start with the option D. Immediately terminate the project without further discussion. So options like this which are extreme, please cancel them in the first go. Always look for the extreme options and cancel them, and then go to the options which look correct and try to pick the one which is more correct out of those. So this is definitely wrong because the project manager does not unilaterally terminate without any direction. C, ignore the portfolio board and continue execution as planned. You can't ignore because ignoring governance is inappropriate. B is provide updated information on costs, progress, and risk to support a decision to continue, change, or terminate. This basically aligns with the project manager's role and how the project manager should behave because project manager should provide transparent data. That's the part of his responsibilities. The portfolio or steering body decides whether to continue, pivot, or stop that particular project. This looks a little correct. Let's see what A says. Option A says insist on completing the project because a lot of work has already been invested. This is correct that you have spent a lot of effort, but you always have to consider the cost. Sunk cost fallacy, past effort alone is not a reason to continue because over here you are just wasting not only your time, then the further future time, but also investing the cost which is not required. It's like, cost fallacy. Hence, option B is the right answer. Next, your project's cheapest supplier is known to have poor environmental practices, but selecting them would save a significant cost. Organizational policy strongly supports environmental, social, and governance principles, ESG principles. What should you do? A. Recommend a supplier aligned with environmental, social, and governance policy, even if their price is higher, and justify the decision. B. Select the cheapest supplier because cost is a measurable metric. C. Split the work between two suppliers to hedge risk. D. Ignore policy and claim you were unaware. Your time starts now. This question talks about ESG constraints clearly. Here you say the project's cheapest supplier is known to have a poor environmental practices, which will definitely affect the ESG. And by selecting them would save significant cost. So you have ESG versus cost here. Organizational policy strongly supports ESG principles. What should you do? Let's go with option D first. Ignore policy and claim you were unaware. This is extreme option, hence we'll cancel it because this is dishonest and unethical at the same time. Split the work between both suppliers to hedge risk. This is what option C says. And still engages a non-compliant supplier. Does not solve the policy conflict, right? Because you're just splitting the work between the suppliers which is like unethical again and non-compliant. B says select the cheapest supplier because cost is a measurable metric. Of course, cost is a measurable metric. But when you say select the cheapest supplier just for the sake of measurable metric, you are here ignoring the established policies and you are leading towards a reputational risk. This is again wrong. Hence, option A looks correct, but let's see why is it correct. Recommend a supplier aligned with ESG policy, even if their price is higher, justify the decision. This is sensible because the project manager must respect organizational values and policies, include ESG as one of those policies, right? So cost is important, but not the only consideration. Hence, this is the right answer. Let's go to the next question quickly. Question number 36. An internal audit identifies that your project's risk register is incomplete and some high-risk items were not documented. The auditor requests full cooperation and immediate corrective action. What is the best response? A. Fully cooperate, update the risk register and implement stronger risk management practices. B. Minimize the findings and argue that risk management adds no value. C. Delay cooperation to avoid disruption to the schedule. D. Ask the auditor to exclude the project from the scope. Okay, so your time starts now, and I recommend that you start from option D. So this question is about internal audit and transparency, right? You're talking about an internal audit that identifies your project's risk register is incomplete and some high risk items are not documented. So this basically means that there is no transparency in the data that you're showing to your stakeholders. So the auditor requests full cooperation and immediate corrective action. Basically, you have to submit all the information about like risk items, update the risk register. Now, what is the best response? We are starting from option D. Ask the auditor to exclude the project from the audit scope. This is wrong, obviously, right? You do not choose audit scope. C is delay cooperation to avoid disruption to the schedule. Delaying may worsen compliance issues, hence this is also wrong. B is minimize the findings and argue that risk management adds no value. Dismissing risk management and audit undermines governance. So obviously this is very wrong. Hence option A is the correct one. Fully cooperate, update the risk register, and implement stronger risk management practices. Because internal audit is a governance function, which is meant to improve controls. So the project manager should cooperate, correct the deficiencies, and strengthen the practices. Next question, number 37. The sponsor wants to close the project as soon as the main deliverable goes live, but you know there are critical lessons that need to be captured and shared with other teams. What should you do? A. Plan and execute lessons learned and knowledge transfer before formal closure. B. Skip lessons learned because they delay closure. C. Ask team members to write notes individually and file them without review. D. Wait for operations to capture lessons later. Okay, so I again suggest let's go from option D. Your time starts now. The answer here is A, and I'll tell you why it is A. First of all, we need to understand what this question is conflicting about. Sponsor wants to close the project, okay, as soon as the main deliverables go live. But there are critical lessons that need to be captured, which means there is a lack of knowledge transfer documentation. Therefore, this is more of a project closure versus knowledge transfer question. And what this is all about is you have to make sure that you update the knowledge transfer documents so that anybody who wants to refer about this project can go to those documents. So let's go with option D first. Wait for operations to capture lessons later. Operations may not be aware of project specific insights, hence this is wrong. Ask team members to write notes individually and file them without review. This is also wrong because unstructured notes without review or consideration are much less useful. B is about skipping lessons learned and because they delay closure. This is wrong because if you skip lessons learned, it wastes organizational learning. Option A is the right answer. Plan and execute lessons learned and knowledge transfer before formal closure, because capturing lessons learned ensure knowledge transfer is a key part, because capturing lessons learned and ensuring knowledge transfer is a key part of project closure is an important thing. Hence, you always plan and execute this information before you do a formal closure. Let's go to the next question. Question number 38. Midway through a project, the organization changes strategy and no longer values one of the key deliverables. However, you are under a legally binding contract with the seller to provide that deliverable. What should the project manager do first? A. Ask the seller to continue but pay them less. B. Immediately cancel the seller's work and stop all payments. C. Ignore the strategic change and continue the work as originally contracted. D. Review the contract terms and discuss options with procurement and legal departments. Your time starts now. Let me reread the question here just to understand what this is conflicting. Midway through a project, okay, so you are in the middle of a project. The organization changes strategy, okay, so there is a change in strategy and no longer values one of the key deliverables. However, you are under a legally binding contract, which means you are under a contractual obligation with the seller to provide that deliverable. This question is basically contractual obligation versus change in strategy. So in such scenarios, what should a project manager do first? Let's go through the options. Let's start with A. Ask the seller to continue but pay them less. This is wrong. You cannot change payment terms unilaterally. B. Immediately cancel the seller's work and stop all payments. This is also wrong because cancelling without following contract terms can trigger legal penalties. C. Ignore the strategic change and continue the work as originally contracted. This is also wrong. Ignoring strategy wastes resources and may misalign with portfolio goals. Option D is the right one here because it says review the contract terms and discuss options with procurement and legal departments. This is correct. Contractual obligations cannot be changed unilaterally, as mentioned during the first option. The project manager must consult procurement and legal to explore termination clauses, renegotiations, or any change orders. So this is the right answer. Let's go to the next question. So let's go through each of the options and try to understand the question. So let's read the question first. A new law is passed that directly impacts your project product requirements and adding mandatory security controls. So it's saying that you have a new law, then that is adding mandatory security controls, which means it is about a compliance driven change. Okay, and now this will increase both cost and duration. So what should you do as a project manager? So the option A says ignore the law until the sponsor confirms its relevance. This is wrong because waiting for sponsor confirmation may delay compliance. Next is option B. Implement the changes quietly without updating baselines. This is also wrong. Changing work without updating baselines creates confusion and poor control. Option C, let's just read it out. It says raise a change request to incorporate new legal requirements and assess impacts on baselines. This looks correct, but let's see what D says. Ask the team to implement only the cheapest parts of the requirement. This is again wrong. D is a wrong option here because partial compliance is still non-compliance, right? So option C is the right answer here because if you understand the question here, the option here, it says raise a change request, okay, which is basically the right thing to do to incorporate new legal requirements and assess the impacts on the baseline. Hence, this is the right answer. Regulatory changes are external constraints that must be reflected in the project. Proper action is to initiate integrated change control, analyze impacts, and update baselines. Hence, this is the right answer. Let's go to the next question. Question number 40. Your project is about to deliver a new customer service platform. The operations team is concerned they lack the skills to maintain and support it after go live. What should the project manager do? Okay, options are close the project once this platform is accepted and let operations figure it out. B, ensure training, documentation, and handover activities are included and completed before closure. C, ask operations to hire external consultants without involving the project. D, extend the project indefinitely and assume operational responsibility. Your time starts now. Okay, let me read out the question again. It says your project is about to deliver a new customer service platform. Okay. The operations team is concerned they lack the skills to maintain and support it after that project or that platform goes live. This is basically about sustaining operations after the project. So let's go through the options and see which is right and which is wrong. Let's start with option D. Okay. Extend the project indefinitely and assume operational responsibility. Projects are temporary. They should not become permanent operations. Hence, this is wrong option. Option C, it says ask operations to hire external consultants without involving the project. External consultants might help, but the project manager must coordinate transition, not ignore it. Hence, this is also a wrong answer. B looks a little correct to me because it talks about training, documentation, update. It says ensure training, documentation, and handover activities are included and completed before closure. Usually, as we all know, that successful transition to operations includes training, documentation, handover procedures, and this is all mentioned in this option. This is part of delivering value, not optional or overhead. Hence, this is the right answer. Well, let's see why A is also wrong here, because A says close the project once the platform is accepted and let operations figure it out. This is never the case. You always have to transition it to operations. Hence, that is also a wrong option. It says because it's like dumping a system on unprepared operations, which will cause failures and user dissatisfaction. Thank you so much for watching the video. We have covered 10 questions on business environment and governance in this video. In the next video, we'll have more of process and people. The further videos as we go ahead in this series will also have a mix so that you can also try to understand which questions belong to which domain and then figure out how to answer that accordingly. Keep watching, share, like, and subscribe. Thank you.